Fort Drum shaking and rattling. If you live around the post, you're hearing it, maybe even feeling it. Tonight, we see the training causing all the noise. 7 News reporter Chad Charette sees how the 10th Mountain Division is keeping its skills sharp.
That was a HIMARS, also known as a High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. It's one out of many types of artillery soldiers are running practice missions with as part of Summit Strike. It's Fort Drum's largest ever multi-domain training operation. The goal? Making sure the troops are capable of fighting on any battlefield. That means infantry, aircraft, and artillery will be working together.
It's the first of its kind in a garrison environment, right? So up here in the North Country, beautiful place to execute that because you guys got the space and the land.
It's handy for exercises like this, since it takes a lot of space to fire off rocket pods. And as you just saw in slow motion, there was a huge backblast.
So HIMARS are intended to move quickly and deliver long-range precision fires in support of the core, usually deep fight.
Also providing precision fire, howitzers.
Fire!
Several ranges down from the HIMARS, teams were loading and firing lines of the massive cannons.
Really what they do is they shape the battlefield for us, and they actually provide kind of that top cover as our friendly forces are moving towards an objective.
Coordinating such a large-scale exercise is quite the challenge, but it's one that the division planned for. Right here is the heart of Summit Strike. It's called the JAGIC, or Joint Air-Ground Integration Center. So far, the man in charge tells us things are going smoothly.
It's been a substantial amount of planning. Get everything synchronized, but it's going well.
Aside from its massive scale, this exercise is particularly noteworthy since it's being conducted entirely on Fort Drum. Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Childers says that shows off both the versatility of the 10th Mountain Division and the post is a training location.
We're showing that a division has the ability to train at this level at home station. And by home station, I mean Fort Drum.
The exercise will be running through the end of the week. Surrounding communities should expect the occasional boom until then. Chad Charette, 7 News.